The following program is brought to you by the Internet Broadcasting Organization. Nothing stated by Steve Bartlett during the Fight Back with Steve show is intended to be legal advice, and appearing on the show does not create an attorney-client relationship with Steve Bartlett. Before taking legal action, it is advisable to consult with an attorney of your choice. The views and opinions expressed by the callers and guests of the Fight Back with Steve show are solely opinionated by those individuals and are not necessarily the expressions and viewpoints of Steve Bartlett or Talkwat Studios.
Hi, it's Monday night, 9 o'clock, time for the Fight Back show. Welcome. Thanks for watching my show. I really appreciate everybody who watches it every week, and I really appreciate it even more if people call in. Is the phone number being flashed on there, Gary? Make sure it's up there because I love callers. The more people call, the more ideas that people can listen to. You know, as opposed to just listening to my ideas. Sometimes I'm right, sometimes I'm wrong, but my ideas are just my ideas. They're just my viewpoints. And I like getting discussions going and taking other people's, point of views, let them be part of the conversation as well. That's what a democracy is supposed to be about, conflicting viewpoints so that you learn from each other, so that your own arguments become stronger. But, so please call. If you see the number on the screen, call. Talk with me, give me your idea, tell me if you like the show, tell me if you hate the show, agree with me, disagree, it doesn't matter, I just want you to call. I was off last week. Last week was Memorial Day. Hopefully you all had a nice holiday. And I'm back and ready to go again this week. Since I started the show, the actual focus of this show is about politics and with a legal spin on the matter. I give my viewpoint about it, which is not exactly what I wanted the show to be when the show first started. I wanted the show basically to be a vehicle for shamelessly plugging my law firm, the law office of Steve Bartlett, and it's gotten away from that. At first, I wanted to explore just legal issues, giving people advice about criminal law or family law or whatnot, but now it's turned more into a political show with a legal subtext. So that's what the show is about. Hopefully you like it. So since it's not about shamelessly plugging my law firm, I'll just go ahead and shamelessly plug my law firm. I'm a board-certified criminal defense attorney. I practice family law, personal injury, bankruptcy, foreclosure defense. You can call my office at 727-942-1000 if you have any legal issues. And what's cool is, since this is my show, no one can tell me don't plug your law firm. But so that's my plug for this week for the law office of Steve Bartlett. Really, if you need any legal help, I can give you a hand with that. But tonight's topic, the topic of tonight's show, is a little bit unusual. It's not about a particular issue. It's about a particular person. And that person is Sergeant Bo Bergdahl. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, Bo Bergdahl. And he's been all over the news recently. He is the private, now he's a sergeant, who was captured as a prisoner of war back in 2009 in Afghanistan, and he's been a prisoner of war ever since. I believe he was the only American who was captured by the enemy over in Afghanistan, and Americans have been trying ever since to negotiate to bring him back home. And finally, Obama yesterday was able to secure his release. The way he was able to do that is 5 people have been detained in Guantanamo and have been released. And so there's been an exchange, basically. We gave up 5 prisoners for the release of our 1 American soldier. Of course, the right-wing Republicans have criticized Obama for doing this for several different reasons. First, the one way they're attacking Obama is by claiming that he's not a hero. He was a deserter. He, if anything, he should be shot for being a traitor to our country, that he left his post, that he tried to desert, that he went AWOL. And therefore, since he went AWOL, he doesn't deserve America's abilities to try to bring this soldier back home. So we're going to be talking about that today on the show. The second issue is that the Republicans are criticizing Obama for violating America's supposed long-standing policy of refusing to negotiate with terrorists. They're arguing that we are trading hostages for terrorists, and that's a very bad policy for various reasons. And finally, they're also criticizing Obama for allowing the people to leave Guantanamo without giving notice to Congress, which is required by federal law. So, of course, they're saying that Obama doesn't follow the law, that Obama is a king, that he should be impeached, and the typical stuff that they talk about Obama. No matter what the issue is, they criticize Obama about that. So, because of this one person, Sergeant Bo, Sergeant Bo Bergdahl, there's all these issues that are stemming from it. So I want to talk about them tonight, and hopefully you'll call, give me your viewpoints, tell me if you agree, disagree, or whatever. Remember, what I say is just my opinion. I might be wrong. You know, it's just my opinion. I try not to lie. I try to be honest with you, and let's explore this together, okay? So the first question is, let's talk about whether he should be considered to be a hero, okay, or whether he's not a hero or not. The rocket scientist who ran for vice president a couple years ago, named Sarah Palin, who quit her job as governor after she got her ass beat in the election with McCain. Of course, she's really pissed off at Obama right now, and because Obama said that this soldier who we were able to bring home served with, quote unquote, honor and distinction. And of course, she's saying that he did not serve with honor and distinction, and that, basically, this guy's a bum for deserting his post. And there is controversy as to whether or not this soldier, I'm just going to call him Sergeant Bo because saying Bird Dog is a long name for me to say. I'll just call him Sergeant Bo. Whether Sergeant Bo actually abandoned his post and left or went AWOL, or if he was abducted. There's a bunch of different viewpoints about this. I don't think the military has actually said officially what that viewpoint is. Some unofficial people have commented and said that he actually had walked away from his post. Others say that he was kidnapped in the latrine. Some say he was drunk. Or there's been all kinds of speculation as to why he left. But he was captured by the enemy, and he was held. Supposedly he's been tortured since 2009, psychological, physical torture in the hand of the enemy. If anyone watches that Showtime show Homeland, who knows what he's been going through during the last 5 years that he's been a prisoner of the Taliban. But Sarah Palin basically says that, we shouldn't be, negotiating for his release because of the fact that he walked away from his post, and therefore he did not serve with honor and distinction. Well, first of all, in our country, you're innocent until being proven guilty, and no one has court-martialed this young man. No one has officially charged him with leaving his post or anything like that. So for her to immediately condemn him as he's not worthy of trying to bring back home based upon pure speculation is really un-American, isn't it? For Sarah Palin to say that she's already found him guilty of abandoning his post and going AWOL, even though we really don't know exactly what happened at this point, that's just really un-American. Who knows what actually happened? But the question is, let's say that's true. Let's say he did go AWOL. Let's say he did desert his post. Does that mean America doesn't owe him anything? That we will allow him to be captured and tortured and held by the enemy for 5 years and that America shouldn't do anything about that, that we don't care about people who for whatever reason choose to leave the battle, to leave the battleground? Do we leave Americans behind? Is that who we are as a country? Now he also said some things that made people think that he may have abandoned his post or deserted the army. He wrote some letters home to his family, and those letters are very disturbing. Not necessarily. Some people would say that they're disturbing because he expresses an anti-American sentiment, that they're disturbing because they express an anti-military sentiment. But that's not how I see his statements. I find them disturbing because they reveal truths about Americans' presence overseas that we don't talk often enough. And let me just read you a little bit about what he wrote to his father through, I guess, email prior to his being abducted by the Taliban. Sergeant Bergdahl wrote that, I'm quoting him now, but hopefully the best I can. He wrote that the system is wrong. I am ashamed to be an American, and the title of U.S. soldier is just a lie of fools. I am sorry for everything here. These people need help, yet what they get is the most conceited country in the world telling them that they are nothing and that they are stupid, that they have no idea how to live. We don't even care when we hear each other talk about running their children down in the dirt streets with our armored trucks. We make fun of them in front of their faces and laugh at them for not understanding we are insulting them. I am sorry for everything. The horror that is America is disgusting. Now, a lot of people will hear that quote and say, he's criticizing America. That's a sin. That's the worst thing any American can do. And that it's terrible because he's criticizing the military, he's criticizing America. But one thing that is a duty of any American under the First Amendment is to criticize America. That's what we're supposed to do. The only way our country works is not to have blind obedience, but to criticize our country when our country is doing something that is morally wrong. And what this guy was saying, he wasn't saying that America is a lousy country for some reason that terrorists would say, or calling for the death of Americans or to, or death to USA or burning effigies. He wasn't doing anything like that. He was criticizing America's involvement in the war in Afghanistan, a war that we're supposed to be helping these people rebuild and become stabilized. But what we're actually doing is we're slaughtering people, many of them innocent civilians. And that's what this guy actually observed going on in Afghanistan. What's most troubling to me is the statement that he made where he says that he hears the soldiers talking to each other, joking about running their children down in the dirt streets with their armored trucks. Now, that's what should be investigated. Are we committing war crimes over in Afghanistan? Nobody knew that we were doing it in Vietnam, but it turned out that there were many atrocities that were going on in Vietnam. Are we killing children and laughing about it and making fun of the people who were trying to help? Besides that being immoral, it goes against the very nature of our mission and is counterproductive. We don't want to alienate these people and have them hate Americans when we're trying to be the liberators. We try to liberate them from the dictatorship and the oppression of the Taliban. But if we ridicule them, if we don't understand them, and if we, run down and kill their children in the streets and laugh about it, that's counterproductive. That's going to create more terrorists in the long run. Now, I don't know what atrocities or the specifics as to what Sergeant Bergdahl saw, but there is something going on over in Afghanistan and was going on over in Iraq that no one really talks about. I mentioned 2 weeks ago about all the soldiers who have come home to our country who are suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, a high percentage of them. And the question is, why? Is it merely because of the danger of being in war or seeing their friends killed and the fear of getting killed themselves? Is that what's causing them to have post-traumatic stress disorder? Or is there something deeper which is causing it? I know a lot of Vietnam vets suffered post-traumatic stress disorder because of the atrocities that they were forced to either participate in or watch, and how their own moral compass got questioned by having to fight in an immoral war. And they saw a lot of atrocities and immoral actions. Is that what's going on in Afghanistan? Is that, if he did leave his post, why he left his post? Obviously, for someone to be that disillusioned, it's probable that he suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder and suffering from emotional disorders, which has resulted in so many of our returning soldiers commit suicide when they return. That's as serious as any other physical wound that our soldiers have suffered over in Afghanistan and Iraq. And we need to be not sitting there and stigmatizing those who suffer the emotional harm of war, like Sarah Palin would do, but we have a duty to protect those soldiers as well. If he deserted because of post-traumatic stress disorder caused by his need to participate, because he was forced to participate in war atrocities or had to witness the slaughter of innocent children like he suggests in his emails, then we have a duty to protect him and to bring him home and to give him the health that he deserves. Why? Because he's an American who was doing his duty for his country. And if he snapped, he still was an American. Not everyone can withstand the pressures of war. Not everyone can do what it takes to come home the same person as when they left. War changes people. And it's wrong for people who aren't over in the war to criticize them and say, well, I would have been different. I would have been able to maintain my patriotism despite the things that I actually observed over there firsthand. So it's disgusting that Sarah Palin criticized Obama for calling this person honor and distinction. Because if you're in the military and you're going over there, staying away from your family, risking your lives to do what you think is right, then you are serving with honor and distinction, and our country owes you gratitude. What he did was protected speech under the First Amendment. He criticized what the United States was doing in Afghanistan, which is his right, and damn it, it's his duty. As an American, it's your duty to stand up to oppression and to say when something's immoral and when something's wrong. Okay? Now, there is another American soldier who was captured and tortured and held for many years by the enemy. And he said a bunch of anti-American things as well. He said anti-American things because he was basically coerced and tortured and forced to do that. But no one ever criticized him for doing that because they understand that war is hell and people have to do what they have to do to survive. And even though the person made anti-American statements, he succumbed to the pressure of war. And his name was John McCain. And he was a prisoner of war over in Vietnam and finally snapped and made propaganda videos anti-USA before he was released. No one criticized him for that. And this man, John McCain, who knows what it's like to be captured and tortured, he put Sarah Palin to be his vice president candidate. And yet she is criticizing a person who's been captured by the enemy, a prisoner of war for 5 years, who's now coming home, and she's criticizing the fact that he's being called someone who served with honor and distinction. Miss Palin, you did not serve with honor or distinction. You walked away from your position. You were elected governor, but because you wanted money, because you wanted fame, because you wanted a goddamn reality show, you walked away from your duty as governor of Alaska. So before you start pointing fingers, you should look at yourself in the mirror. And then also ask yourself, your son, who proudly wore our colors and went to war, I don't know if he's in Afghanistan or Iraq, if he were captured by the enemy and held for 5 years, would you be willing to do whatever it takes to bring him home to you? And would you be insulted if anyone dared question his patriotism or loyalty to this country? Shame on you, Sarah Palin. Now, the second issue I'm going to talk about tonight is the issue of whether it was whether Obama is wrong for negotiating with terrorists by doing hostage exchanges. Ted Cruz said that he violated years of American tradition that we do not negotiate with terrorists. But Ted, your hero, Ronald Reagan negotiated with terrorists. He traded arms for hostages. That's exactly what he did over in Iran. And then illegally took the money from trading the arms for hostages and used it to fund the soldiers in Nicaragua. Okay? So Ronald Reagan did it. He traded soldiers for hostages. But things are a little bit different. First of all, what's the definition of a terrorist? If we capture somebody, are all the people we captured in war, are they all terrorists? Don't they have prisoners of war anymore? Is every single person we capture a terrorist? Wars end with an exchange of prisoners. After we beat the Nazis and we had all the Germans who were prisoners of war, we traded out the prisoners of war for American prisoners of war. The Japanese committed atrocities on American soldiers, American POWs, but that didn't mean that we said, well, we're not going to trade our soldiers at the end of the war for the soldiers that you have captured. That's something that you do, is you trade prisoners. And if you're not willing to do that, how else do you get your POWs back? At the end of Vietnam, we got our POWs back. After we left Vietnam, we were able to eventually get our POWs to come home. How do you do that? You trade out the prisoners, okay? Just because we have labeled them to be enemy combatants versus being soldiers with full protection under the Geneva Conventions doesn't mean that we're not going to use them or try to negotiate the release of our own prisoners by exchanging prisoners of war, okay? The other thing about this that's important is once we leave Afghanistan, the Afghan government is going to be on their own for the most part. And the people who made up the Taliban and the Taliban supporters are going to be part of that country, whether we like it or not. And these people are going to have to start creating a peace amongst themselves so that the country can be one country instead of having a civil war. And one of the major points about that is the Taliban want their people back. They want their people released. That is something that the government of Afghanistan wants. The government of Afghanistan wants us to release the prisoners so they can help that patch up the country again once we leave. So that that's one of the peace agreements to try to structure a new government, to let the prisoners of war come home, and then let's start rebuilding this country together. The other thing is the terms of the exchange are really interesting. We didn't just put them on a plane and drop them off with parachutes to Afghanistan so they can join the Taliban. We put them in another country called Qatar, Qatar. I think that's how you pronounce it, Qatar. And they have to, under the terms of the agreement, stay in Qatar for 1 year. So they're not going back to the front lines in Afghanistan anytime soon. They're going to be in Qatar. Now, the guys who are released, I heard, aren't a bunch of good guys. They've been pretty high up members of the Taliban. Mohammad Fauzi was a Taliban deputy intelligence minister. Another person had contacts with Osama bin Laden. Third person has been linked to mass killings of Shiite Muslims in Afghanistan about 10 years ago. So these aren't good guys that we released. But it's my understanding that the World Court has warrants for some of these people and would like to prosecute these people as being war criminals. We refuse to cooperate with the World Court. When we grab someone, we take them back to Cuba. That's where we keep them. We don't give up people to the World Court. I'm thinking that what Obama pulled off was pretty sly. I don't think these people are going to be going back to Afghanistan. I think that within the next year, these folks are going to be taken by the International World Court and arrested while they're in Qatar and brought up in charges and then tried as war criminals in the World Court. That's what I think is going to happen. I don't think they're ever going to go back. I think they're going to get rearrested while they're serving this, I don't know, house arrest over in Qatar for the next year. That's what I'm predicting. And if I'm right, you heard it here first. Okay? And the third thing that is a big issue that you've been hearing about Obama is that, well, he broke the law. He had no rights to do what he did. Because under federal law, it's the National Defense Authorization Act of 2013. Before he can release any prisoners from Guantanamo Bay, he must give Congress 30 days notice before he can do that. So therefore, they're bitching and saying he should be impeached and he should be hung and kicked out of office and put in jail and made to rot in a dungeon somewhere. That's what the Republicans are saying about Obama, of course. But it's not as simple as they claim. When Obama signed the law, the National Defense Authorization Act for 2013, he did a signing statement. And that signing statement said that he is reserving the right to not comply with the law because in his opinion it was unconstitutional, and under exigent circumstances he should have the right as commander-in-chief to do what he wants to do with American detainees. Okay? Now, that's what he did in a signing statement. And there, of course, the Republicans are bitching, saying he can't do a signing statement. Signing statements themselves are unconstitutional. A president cannot interpret the meaning of a statute and enforce only the provisions of the statute that he chooses to enforce, even though that's exactly what Obama did. Well, there is a long history legally of doing these signing statements. The very first signing statement was done by James Monroe, the guy who did the Monroe Doctrine, president number 5. And he did it, and American presidents did it very sparingly, where they actually would write about what provisions of a statute they would enforce and what not because of constitutionality of it. And prior to Reagan, it had only been done 75 times in American history. But then when Ronald Reagan became president, he started to love to do these signing statements. Under Reagan, Bush 1, and Clinton, they did it 247 times. American history, 200 years before that, they only did it a total of 75 times. But between these three presidents, Reagan, Bush, and Clinton, they did it 247 times. George W. Bush did it by himself over 100 times. Bush himself, W, did it more times by himself than from every president from James Monroe through Jimmy Carter. Obama does it too. It's the new thing that executives think they can do. Even though there is nothing in the Constitution which gives the president the power to do a signing statement where he gives his opinion as to what the law actually means. And legally, the signing statement has no legal authority at all. Has no legal authority at law. The way the Constitution says is Congress passes the law, the president either signs it or vetoes it, and signs it as is. The president does not have a right to do something like a line item veto and strike provisions of the statute that he doesn't like. He can write his comments on it, but it's not legally controlling. Now, the question as to whether or not signing statements themselves are unconstitutional or not went up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court had a case back in 1984 called Chevron. And what happened is they said that it is okay for an executive to interpret a law on their own and give their own interpretations of a law, which is what they do in the signing statements, if Congress has not directly spoken to the precise question at issue. So if Congress hasn't spoken to the direct question at issue, then the president can give a signing statement interpreting as to what the law actually means. They went too far in 1998 when Congress actually passed a law, which Clinton signed, which allowed the president to have a line item veto, which he could actually strike provisions of laws that he didn't like. That was declared unconstitutional for the reasons I said before. The Constitution says specifically, Congress writes a law, the president either signs it or doesn't sign it. He has no right to strike things. So the question is the signing statement that Obama did, is that a is that an executive veto? Is that a line item veto? Or is it part of his powers to interpret a statute that isn't clear? He said when he did what he just did, was it today or yesterday, about releasing these people, that it was done under exigent circumstances. He had to do the trade now, and that Congress, when they passed this appropriations bill, didn't consider this as a possibility in order to get our troops back. So whether it's illegal or not, it may be illegal, but does that mean that it's a crime and that Obama should be impeached? No. Why? Because Obama thought what he did was following the law, his interpretation of the law. He wasn't doing it in an underhand, secretive way. What Obama did was he thought it was legal. It may be legal. The courts could decide it, but in all probability, they would say under Chevron versus USA that it is a presidential discretion to interpret a law without clear direction of Congress, and Congress in the law did not specifically say that we can't release prisoners as part of a prisoner POW exchange program. Okay, so that's tonight's show. Thanks for, I'm sure the reason I didn't get any callers is because you were all just riveted by every word I was saying and hanging on it. So remember what I always say every week, you got three choices in life when facing oppression. One is you can ignore it. Two, you can just go along with the flow. Or three, you can rise to your feet, you can put your fist in the air, and you can fight back. Thank you. See you next week.
This program was brought to you by the Internet Broadcasting Organization, setting the standard for new media broadcasting.